All
So I
right.
think it looks like we're coming up on the bottom of the hour, so I'm guessing we should probably go ahead and get started. And as additional people join us, Gabby, you can admit them as needed.
So I will go ahead, and anyone that has any cameras or microphones turned on, I will turn those off. But when we hit the Q&A portion at the end, you will have access to turn back on your microphones if you have access, or your cameras. So they are just turned off to eliminate any interference during the presentation. So welcome everybody, and thanks for joining us.
Yes, welcome. So this is the latest in the series of webinar events sponsored by the Create Energy Center. We're pleased that you're able to join us here today. For those that are new to the Create Energy Center, we are funded by the National Science Foundation with the objective to advance energy technology educational programs to provide a skilled technical workforce for the energy sector. My name is Ken Walls. I'm the director and principal investigator for the Create Energy Center, and thank you for taking the time to be with us here today. As Gabrielle indicated, we will mute your microphones during the presentation and then unmute them afterwards. If you have questions as we go, please feel welcome to type them into the chat if you're able, and I'll try and corral those to field for our speaker. And with that, I will do a little introduction here. Our presenter today is Jason Oliver from College of the Canyons. Jason is the chair of the Architecture and Interior Design program at College of the Canyons, and he's a California licensed architect with over 25 years of professional experience and a LEED accredited professional in building design and construction. His experience as an architect includes being on design teams for numerous projects in the US and Japan, ranging from small residential projects up to international airports and major hospitals. Jason began his education studying architectural drafting at LA Pierce College, earned a bachelor's degree in environmental design and a master's in architecture from the University of Colorado. Jason is an active participant in a variety of nonprofit educational organizations, including the Santa Clarita Environmental Education Consortium, the Southern California chapter of the National Organization of Minority Architects, and the Los Angeles chapter of the U.S. Green Building Council. So with that, Jason, I'm going to turn things over to you, and thank you for joining us today.
Great. Thank you, Ken. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you to the Create Energy Center for giving me this opportunity to talk about some of our international collaborations. I'm going to share my screen. All right, so what I was going to talk about today was some of the international design projects that we've been engaging with students and faculty, both from our college at College of the Canyons in Santa Clarita, California, as well as some of our international partners. And there's actually a term that's used for this type of collaboration, which I just learned myself recently, which is COIL. It's the acronym of Collaborative Online International Learning. And I think that's a fairly new acronym that's probably born from the pandemic, as a lot more people have been doing things online or having to do things remotely. It's obviously become a much more prominent way to engage with people internationally. Obviously, you know, there have been collaborations in the past, but it's become sort of supercharged because of the pandemic. So what I'm going to be doing is talking about the kind of behind the scenes process that's gone on at College of the Canyons in our architecture and interior design program, and how we've undertaken some of these international collaborations, and hopefully to give others a sense of why we do this, you know, what are our motivations, and what does everybody kind of get out of it, you know, what are the sort of end goals and the outcomes. So for today, you know, I wanted to discuss the means and methods that we use for, you know, developing, because part of this is how do we develop these projects from nothing, you know, kind of create them from scratch, and then how do we go about conducting them successfully with students and faculty from both institutions, to some kind of defined outcome. Also examine some of the planning and coordination considerations that we faced at College of the Canyons, particularly with making these student-centric experiences for the Quill projects, and that's a really important aspect of them that I'll try to reiterate as we talk about this a little bit more. And then lastly, discuss some of the leverage points that the COIL method, or that these collaborative online learning experiences can provide as a means for building up capacity and currency for the faculty and for the college. And so my understanding is probably the best way to go about this talk today is I'm going to do my presentation, and then we've reserved some time at the end, probably about 15 or 20 minutes for a Q&A. So if you have questions as we're going, feel free to type them in the chat, and then we'll at the end try to intercept them and do the best I can to answer them, and have a little bit of dialogue towards the end. So I wanted to start off actually with a little bit of history about some of the student faculty projects we've done at College of the Canyons over the year, because we didn't just start doing international collaborations. It didn't just sort of come out of a vacuum or out of nowhere. It's actually been a long process to build up our capacity and our capabilities. And so for me personally, it goes back a little over a decade ago, when I was faculty mentor for a group of students that entered a California statewide design competition called Sustainable Visions. And this is one that was put on by the, basically involving all of the community colleges in California, as well as some Cal State programs. And the College of the Canyons team actually came in first place for their design to create alternative transportation systems for the campus. That's sort of a fictional project, but it was a lot of fun, and it gave the students a chance to work on a group project and present it in front of a large audience. And kind of the coolest part is they actually won a cash prize, and they got to hold a big check, one of those giant checks, which is a really kind of a fun thing. But for me, the important thing was that they a group of diverse students that really had never engaged with each other before came together, worked collaboratively, and as the mentor, I learned a little bit about helping to coordinate and guide a team of students through a design project. And then we started doing more and more projects. I'm not going to go into all of them because we've actually done quite a few, but I'm kind of fast forward about 7 or 8 years. And we started doing some collaborations with the city of Santa Clarita, trying to engage students with some of the local issues that are important for the city that the city's engaged in. One is stormwater reclamation, so that when it rains, where does that stormwater go? And there's a lot of thought that goes into that, answering that question. Stormwater doesn't just sort of run off into nowhere. It actually, there's a huge amount of engineering infrastructure to capture water, and ideally to actually let that water percolate into the ground so that it recharges the aquifer underground, the below ground water sources, which is where our city gets about half of its water from. So we need to make sure that we recharge that. And so the city's always looking for ways to improve on that, and also for outreach, to talk to the public about their role in stormwater capture. And so a group of students met with the city staff from the public works departments on numerous occasions, and they engaged in a research project and produced a report. And then this picture in the top right is the students actually presenting their project to the city staff. The second project, the one below it, which is called Water Talks, which actually involved a sort of leveraging of our relationship with the city of Santa Clarita. So we already were familiar with the public works staff, and because of that, they were going to start engaging with Cal State University San Bernardino on a project about drinking water and educating the public about sources of drinking water and the overall process of where, so this part of Southern California gets its water. And so because of that relationship, they invited us to participate in the project as well. So it was sort of again, an entrepreneurial thing where because we had established a relationship with the city, that opened up the door, created the opportunity for this second project. And I think that's an important theme that we'll see when we start talking about these COIL collaborations, is that we, often try to leverage relationships that we have to, unlock doors to engaging with new partners and sort of broadening the potential for the project. So the Water Talks one was primarily public outreach, and it was about the students educating the public. So we did a series of public events, typically farmers markets. In the bottom right, they went to the Newhall Library and met with families and kids on Saturdays to teach them about, where water comes from. And so that was a lot of fun. That project fortunately concluded right before the pandemic hit. So those pictures were maybe about a month before all this stuff closed down and nobody was going out in public. So we're fortunate we were able to get that project in right before the pandemic really took hold. We've also started to do some travel as part of our student collaborations or our student projects. So for the second year now, we've participated in the student design competition that's affiliated with or part of the national convention for the National Organization of Minority Architects. And so a team of College of the Canyon students worked on their competition entry and actually flew to Nashville in late October. So they just got back a couple weeks ago, and they presented their project there in the bottom right, or excuse me, the bottom left picture, which was a community center and public space that's part of healing a community that was sort of not destroyed, but greatly affected by a interstate highway that was built through there in the 1960s. And so it's sort of trying to mend that community in a sort of, public facing way. But again, the most important thing for the students was that they worked together collaboratively as a team, and in this case also traveled. So there was a lot of logistics involved in getting the students to the competition, getting their model there. We had to ship that separately. And so we're going to leverage these experiences to, at some point in the future, start traveling internationally and, and sort of expanding the capabilities of what we do for these types of projects. So there's some pictures of the students in Nashville. They obviously got some amazing experiences being able to take a trip that they otherwise probably would never have been able to take. And so there's a lot of bonding with them and the faculty member that went, and also meeting students, in our case, at transfer universities. So there were some other community colleges there, but there were also the upper level universities, USC, University of Southern California was there, Cal Poly San Luis Obispo was there. And so they got to engage with their peers that are, maybe 2 or 3 years ahead of them in their education. So that was really good networking for them as well. So that's an important aspect that the students got out of it. So I think the theme that, by kind of showing you the history, I think my intent was to talk about building up capacity by doing local things. There's a lot of logistics involved for the faculty and even for the students to successfully navigate one of these projects. And so by kind of starting modest, starting local, and kind of building out from there with each successive project, it helps you to stay on top of the logistics. If you were to try to do an international collaboration that involved travel and, a competition and all these things, that's a lot of balls to juggle in the air. And I think that it's better off to kind of build up to that level rather than getting overwhelmed really quickly. The other thing is we always try to use these projects as a means for marketing our program. So obviously we do a lot of social media exposure from them. And then also that it's a fun part of the profession. One of the great things that I got to see out of this project, even though I didn't travel with them, was, just seeing the fun the students were having, that it really shows them the fun parts of the profession, that they can engage with professionals and, you know, get a little bit of travel in, be exposed to, you know, different people, different, you know, personality types. And so it kind of lights their fire in a way. And so that's the one of the great experiences they get out of that, is that hopefully reinforces their decision to pursue this career path, whatever it may be. So in our case, it's architectural design or sustainable design. But for other subjects, you know, it might be something else that kind of gets them excited about it. So as we start looking at the COIL project, specifically the kind of international projects, I think the one metric that I've tried to use as we've been engaging with these is that every decision that's made, or every aspect of it, be student-centric. And I think that really is how you can judge the success of a project, is what is the student getting out of this? What is their primary benefit? And I have a kind of set of priorities that I use to gauge, you know, what is that? For our program, I think it's really based on the skills that a student gets out of it, because these are unique learning opportunities. They can maybe gain skills they otherwise might not get in a traditional 4-credit class. So on the last couple projects, you know, one of the applied technical skills that we've been introducing to students is building energy modeling, where they take their architectural design projects, and as they're designing them, they're learning how to do energy modeling to, you know, iteratively determine the performance of their designs. You know, how energy performing is it? How, you know, is it going to be sustainable? Is it going to be naturally ventilated, naturally daylit, and to what degree? And so in a sort of low stakes environment, they're learning these technical skills so that when they do get introduced to them in the classroom a little bit later in their education, they're already somewhat familiar with it. It's not a sort of a foreign topic. Another important thing for our students in the design professions is having portfolio content. So often when a student is going to be transferring to you know, an upper division program, they need to have a portfolio of work that they've done that shows their creative skills and their technical skills. And often we find that students, you know, even though they've completed the associate's degree program, they don't really take seriously the whole portfolio idea. They, you know, they know it's coming. They know they're going to have to prepare one at some point, whether it's for employment or transfer purposes. But maybe they just, you know, don't take their project seriously in the classes they're working on, or they don't save their work. You know, they don't, you know, photograph, scan, or somehow document the work they've been doing. And so by the time they have to produce their portfolio in their second year, they don't really have a lot. And so these projects give them, you know, another opportunity to create some really rich portfolio content. The third thing is soft skills development. So again, those are the sort of human interaction skills that are important for all of us, you know, that are, you know, engaging with other humans, you know, and whether it's in a professional environment or a social environment. And I think also because of the unique nature of an international learning project, they also get a sort of cultural awareness. We'll see that in, you know, several of the projects, there's sort of a language component to it, you know, that we've done bilingual projects, which is kind of unique. They learn about differing societal values, you know, that some of these other cultures that we're engaging with, their values on the built environment or architecture are quite a bit different than what we might have here in the United States or in the West. And so that's kind of an eye-opener for some students, as well as, you know, exposing them to differences in the industry. So like, you know, in architecture, it's, you know, buildings aren't necessarily constructed the same way that we might here in the United States and other countries. The different materials are used, different means and methods. And so that's really important for students to be aware of, so that they can either appreciate or more deeply understand why things are done the way they are, you know, let's say in Southern California. And then that might, you know, give them a better understanding of why construction is a little different in other parts of the United States as well. And then for me personally, I think an important soft skill is to get students out of their comfort zone, to sort of challenge them, and not in a way that overwhelms them or stresses them out, but sort of gets them familiar and comfortable with going beyond their kind of linear pathway through their education, to realize that, that as professionals, they're going to have to become self-learners and sort of self-motivated to challenge themselves. And so these projects are a good exposure to that, that it's not a static activity. They're not just coming to these projects and just sort of sitting there and like they would be in a classroom and listening, and somehow magically they gain skills and somehow magically they learn knowledge and do all these things. What they begin to understand is that it's a process, it's an action to learn, that learning is a verb, and that their involvement in these projects and the engagement that they put into it is going to be reflective of what they're going to get out of it. And so that's a really important outcome as well. And that they need to sort of supplement their education, with not just going to classes, but doing these kind of extracurricular things as well. And then lastly, the fourth item is that some students benefit from academic credit, so they can get up to 3 or 4 units of cooperative work experience credit, and that obviously can go on their transcript and help them either apply towards their associate's degree or for transfer credits. So the first international project I want to talk about, which was one that we completed about a year ago, roughly, which was one we did with a college in El Salvador. And we had been, as a college, reaching out to international partners for several years to do collaborations. We've always had a lot of international students at our college. Because of where we're located in Los Angeles County, it's a pretty popular destination for students from other parts of the world that maybe want to go on and study at UCLA or USC or one of the major universities. So College of the Canyons is a good stepping stone towards that. But we've always wanted to have also an outward-facing international program. So in working with our international studies program, we started making relationships with other institutions, and sometimes we would try to pursue a grant that would maybe fund some sort of a collaborative partnership, but often these grants never kind of panned out. We either didn't receive them, or neither side kind of completed the effort involved for whatever reason. But on occasion, we've been able to, after we've initiated a dialogue with an institution, we've been able to kind of get it to stick. And so with this college in El Salvador, we applied for a grant with them, and the idea was to do some sort of educational partnership. And the grant never came to fruition. But in the process of applying for the grant, we learned a lot more about this institution, which created the opportunities. We'll see there were some unique things about what they were doing and about what we were doing at College of the Canyons that led us both to believe, we really should do something, even though we're not going to get this grant money and be able to do the project we originally intended, we can still do something, a COIL project. So ICFPADI, which is like a community college or the equivalent of it in El Salvador, they have several campuses down there. And so they're very much analogous to a community college in the United States. Students go there to learn technical skills, and they actually do have an architecture program very much like we have here at College of the Canyons. And so several of the faculty involved from ITCA were through their architecture program or their engineering program, which became really helpful. And then several of the College of the Canyons faculty came from our architecture program. And it wasn't actually until we got involved in the project that I learned that one of our faculty, Orlando Flores, who I knew was from El Salvador, I didn't realize he had actually taken a couple classes as a student at ITCA when he lived in El Salvador, over a decade ago. So that was kind of an interesting thing to learn about. And so this project, which actually went up until the spring of this year, May of 22, was kind of our last efforts, but the bulk of it occurred right around fall of 21 and early winter and spring of 22. And so as we were engaging with the ICA people, we learned that they had actually done a Habitat for Humanity design for this family. And so if any of you know about Habitat for Humanity, they're a nonprofit organization that work throughout the world. And they build houses for, families like this that otherwise, would be living in a shack that they, constructed themselves out of, materials they found, reclaimed, metal and stuff like that. So this was a family of 2 parents and 4 children. And some funds were raised by Habitat for Humanity, and the architecture and engineering program at ITKFPADI designed a sustainable house. And interestingly enough, they actually ended up constructing it for the family. And so, this was something where we realized, this is really unique for them to have done this and to have seen it all the way through. These are pictures of the actual house that was built by ITKFPADI students. And it had some really interesting sustainable features. Now, it's a really modest house, obviously, by standards here in the United States, but in El Salvador, this is, a pretty nice house. And obviously, if you're living in a, shack made of, materials you found on the side of the road, this is actually really, really quite nice. It was built of concrete masonry. It was naturally ventilated. It had a green roof. It had, electrical outlets. They could have a refrigerator, and it had space for the parents to be in a room and for the children to be in another room, and to have a kind of shared space in between them. And so this was built in a town called San Miguel, which is, we'll see, is actually the area where the project site for our project occurred. It's a very kind of rural area. It's a small town, but it's also surrounded by volcanoes. There's a lot of seismic activity in this part of El Salvador, a lot of geological activity. And so that kind of plays into the design and construction of buildings like this. So since we weren't going to be pursuing a grant, we were thinking, well, what vehicle can we use to pursue a project together? And that's when it occurred to me, well, why don't we do the annual Solar Decathlon, which I knew was a kind of an international competition put on by the National Renewable Energy Laboratory here in the United States, which is a division of the Department of Energy. And it seemed like a great vehicle for bringing some structure to the project, because otherwise, if it was just up to the faculty at their college and ours, we, wouldn't really have much form to a project. And so this gives us some goals, some deadlines. It defines some deliverables that the students have to produce. It also provides resources on education that our students took advantage of. So learning about sustainable design aspects, and obviously the other thing, which was building energy modeling, was an important component that we were able to take out of this. So we started meeting weekly. We developed a project schedule. We actually selected a project site in San Miguel, and then we recruited students for the project from both of our colleges. And then from that, the project just started taking off. The students, from both colleges, we had quite a bit of bilingual speakers. So a lot of, most of the College of the Canyons teams, the students spoke some Spanish, or, were some of them were quite fluent in Spanish. And then from the students in El Salvador, it was kind of the inverse. They had a little bit of English, but we found that it was the faculty that actually had the largest gap in communication. And so we thought, well, it'd be interesting if we conducted this project as a bilingual project. And so one of the things that was an important thing was for all of our content and our deliverables to be produced and sort of documented in both languages, and that we'd also use the measurements from both countries, because in El Salvador they use the metric system, which we don't use in the United States. And so they got to learn a little bit about the American standard system of measurement. We got to learn a little bit more about the metric system as a result. And the students started off by learning about the climate of the site in El Salvador. They did a site analysis. They learned a little bit about this iterative sustainable design process. So that's where, as we're designing a structure, that we start using tools like building energy modeling to inform the design, that we come up with a basic concept, let's say for the house, and we test it. How is it going to work, as far as solar exposure? Is it going to overheat, or is it going to be too cold? How's the natural ventilation going to work? How can we make it better? And so that we're not just using sort of our, gut judgment, we're actually using a data-driven process. The students that were involved were all, basically, first and second year students, because we're a community college. Most of their students had just finished their first year of architecture classes. So they had some experience with some 3D modeling. They were all full-time students. Our students had a little bit more in the way of computer skills, but they were also, working full-time, most of them. And so trying to mesh up those, different sort of profiles, the student profiles was unique. It took a little bit of thinking, but ultimately we were able to get it to work where we could meet on a weekly basis virtually. That was one of the benefits of Zoom. But we also utilized things like a Slack channel as a way for the students to communicate in real time, if they just had quick questions that they wanted to bounce among each other. And then we also used Google Drive as a way to host files, shared files between the group. So the students produced actually 2 separate designs. I'm going to just show a little bit of this video here. This is about an 8-minute video, and it sort of, they describe their project. This is the video presentation that they produced as part of the Solar Decathlon project. So let me know if you can't hear this.
Both our teams have been working on improving the design of a bioclimatic house constructed in 2018 by ITCA. This house can be seen on the left side of the screen. This new bioclimatic house design, seen on the right, focus on enhancing the quality of life for a 6-member family that includes 2 adults and 4 children by emphasizing sustainability, interior comfort, structural safety, resiliency, longevity, and low maintenance for occupants. These designs intend to assist low-income families through climate responsiveness and net zero, providing residents with comfort and resiliency through minimal and ecological footprint. Both of our teams' improved designs of the house were presented and reviewed at the 2022 Solar Decathlon Design Challenge. The site is located in San Miguel, El Salvador, near Rio Grande, a river that flows consistently throughout the year that has significant seismic activity. The site is located near the equator at 13.5 degrees north. The climate of the site is tropical and temperatures range between 64 and 102 Fahrenheit. Dry seasons are from November to April, while raining seasons last for most of the year, happening between May and October. We will start with the first design solution presented by our team, College of the Canyons.
Previous Habitat for Humanity house was 55 square meters. In comparison, our new design is measured at 70 square meters or 749 square feet. This change provides the convenience of a laundry room, 2nd bathroom, and a 3rd bedroom, which comfortably accommodates a family of 6. Due to the affordability targets, the agenda is to keep the design simple, yet sustainably effective, while emphasizing reduction of heat from local climate. To do so, the project implements local materials and multiple clean energy and cost-reducing designs.
There are 6 sustainable design features to be considered. The first is green batten roof, which shades the roof from direct heat gain from sunlight, reducing the temperature of the structure while introducing healthy microbiomes from the vegetation. A raised foundation that reduces the risk of flooding, as well as improving air circulation with the addition of vents, with the added benefit of a storage space. The addition of a solar chimney that provides the ability of efficiently exhausting hot air held inside of the house. It also introduces natural lighting to the bathroom. Solar panels, which provides a renewable, clean energy source to the house residents while reducing electricity bills over time. A water collection system that allows residents to harvest rainwater, reducing the consumption of potable water. This addition should be a requirement due to the site's bountiful rain season year-round. And lastly, an integrated clothesline system that provides residents the ability to dry clothes using the sun's heat without stepping a foot out of their laundry room through a pulley system.
In this section, we can see the paths of natural airflows that help maintain the structure at cooler temperatures. To increase its effectiveness, the space of a raised foundation and high ceilings allow operable windows to keep cool air below while also extracting heat from above. Besides cooling the structure, taking advantage of natural lighting and ventilation helps achieve a net zero energy home, resulting in the creation of more electricity than it consumes. These slides exemplify the comfort of the interior space. On the top left, we have the master bedroom, and on the top right, we can demonstrate a bilateral view of the two shared bedrooms. Although the project is considerably small for 6 members, the affordability and spaces of the home provide comfort with privacy, healthy living conditions, usage of local materials, and modern sustainable designs.
With the commitment to meet some of the objectives of sustainable development, we have designed the innovative bioclimatic house to be self-sufficient and thus improve the comfort and quality of life for a family group of 6 members. Returning to all the analysis explained above, a design proposal is presented that consists of the following spaces: a living room, a kitchen, a dining room, 2 bathrooms, 3 bedrooms, a laundry area, and a room for energy service, with only an area of 72 square meters. And here we can see some representations of the circulation of winds within the building. Focusing on sustainability and energy efficiency, self-sufficiency is achieved by incorporating a photovoltaic panel system. In addition, a structure designed to place a green roof will be implemented, which will help reduce the temperature inside the building. The first image that we can see here is about the things that must be done for energy efficiency. The first is that the occupants will be educated about the concept of bioclimatic house to make possible the second aspect that will be achieved using energy-saving devices. The third aspect is bioclimatic architecture. We can see it in the use of pergolas and green roof. And the last one is the use of the photovoltaic system. In the next picture, we can see that Category A devices consume approximately 50% less energy than those with an average consumption. So it is important to make use of these devices to save energy consumption.
We have an investment of $1,000 with a return on investment of 3 years. In this image, we could see the energy consumption of a traditional house, which is 300 kilowatt per month, and a bioclimatic house with an energy consumption of 200 kilowatt per month. So with the photovoltaic system, 150 kilowatt per month will be injected with 5 solar panels. One way to guarantee lighting is the use of energy to the electrical network. This mechanism will allow the building to have energy when it cannot be supplied by solar panels. That means that we will buy 50 kilowatt per month. We can observe the different characteristics that help improve the quality of indoor air, reduce water consumption in the home, obtain a home in harmony with the environment, and help the family's comfort. A passive bioclimatic criterion is applied with a natural ventilation aided by stack effect. This means that cold air is injected through the lower part and through lattice and expelling hot air through the upper windows, like we show in this image. This project is adapted to our climatic conditions, for which different construction systems have been developed, helping the building to stay cool. Here we can see another part of the representation of the circulation of the winds inside the building. And we can also observe the 4 facades of the building, like north, east, and south, and west view. Finally, we could see different views of the interiors spaces of the house. And on the image, we can see the main room, the dining room, the kitchen, and the bedrooms.
Both our teams have been working on.
So that was the ICFIPADI project that we did. So it was really successful. The students got to present it to the Board of Trustees of our college, as well as the Board of Trustees at ICFIPADI. So that presentation was done entirely in Spanish, which is really unique because for myself, I was struggling to follow along and obviously don't speak fluent Spanish. But for the students, it was really a great experience. And I think that for the faculty, a lot of the benefits that we got from it kind of flowed naturally from, you know, the benefits the students were getting. The next project, and again, I'm kind of short on time here, so I'm going to keep this brief. This is a project we're actually just starting up right now. It's with a university in Romania, University Spiro Herit. And so we're going to do another solar decathlon competition. So this year's competition for our project site that's in eastern Romania, right near the Black Sea. And this is an area that working with the faculty and the administrators from the university, they've said there's a need for educating the people that live in this part of Romania, which is the Danube Delta. So the Danube River runs through most of Europe and primarily Eastern Europe, and then it eventually discharges into the Black Sea on the eastern coast of Romania. And a lot of the indigenous people that typically work in agriculture or fishing, they were farmers and family farms and things like that. They basically have, either been displaced or they're sort of underemployed, and that's the kind of thing that we're hearing about all throughout the world, and even here in the United States, is how can we find opportunities or develop opportunities for people like that to find meaningful employment. That's kind of the mission of the community college system. And so we're going to be doing a project for an educational facility that involves not only educating these residents, but also is involved in restoring the ecosystem of the Danube Delta that's being stressed by climate change, just like a lot of environments here in the United States are as well. We actually just met with our team on Wednesday night, so we're just going to start doing our site analysis, going forward, and we'll be meeting with the Romanian faculty and students soon to kind of collaborate on sort of the next steps for that project. But it'll probably follow a very similar trajectory to the one that we did with El Salvador, as far as doing some educational content up front for the first month and a half, and then working with the student teams to start developing their designs and preparing their exhibits for the Solar Decathlon submittal that'll be due in late February of 2023. So we have a project description that we developed. That's kind of what we have to go off of right now, because it's a sort of fictional project that gives us a little bit of flexibility. But this was derived from our conversations with the Romanians and some of the people involved in a nonprofit organization, and actually a couple architects that are doing work in this eastern Romanian area. So they gave us a lot of feedback. So we're starting to learn a little bit about the culture, a little bit about the environment there. And then interestingly enough, on this project, again, leveraging our relationships, we actually have a member of the U.S. Green Building Council Los Angeles, Colin Magnum, who's runs their Net Zero Accelerator, which is like an incubator program that develops businesses for sustainability, whatever it may be. And so he's going to be involved in the project as well, and he's already started to advise us on how we can expand the dimensions of this project. So it's not just an architectural design project, but it's something a bit richer than that for the benefit of the community. So we're working on that one right now, and then we've also started a dialogue with a university in Scotland, the University of Dundee, and they have an architecture program, and so we're starting to build up that relationship, and hopefully we'll do our next COIL project with them. It's kind of up in the air, and like a lot of these sort of entrepreneurial efforts, you're not quite sure where it's going to go. You have to kind of start walking down the road, and when opportunity presents itself, have to jump on it. So obviously we've talked a little bit about some of the benefits for the students, some of the benefits for the institutions or the colleges. I think it's also important to some of the lessons learned that I've had is, what about some of the other dynamics that as faculty we have to navigate, the sort of bureaucracy of our institutions, if these relationships were conducted in a sort of traditional structure of the college environment, it would never get off the ground. It would just take too long. And so they need to be very quick moving and very entrepreneurial. And so, having a relationship, having dialogue with our administrators and my deans, saying, hey, we're going to pursue these projects. These are the entities that we're, engaged with. We're doing this through our international studies program. But beyond that, kind of stand back and watch us, do something with it. And I think that's been really helpful to build that trust with the administration where they realize, okay, we're going to let you do this and, trust that it's going to follow, obviously, everything to the benefit of the students. And, again, if that is the motivation, then ultimately the outcome is positive for the students, it's positive for the school. But it doesn't get mired in the sort of, the bureaucracy that can really slow it down. The other thing I found that a lesson learned was that some of the international institutions, the universities and whatnot, they're really just kind of looking for students to come and study at their school. And so they're, kind of flush that out early on in the relationship. Do they actually want to do some sort of collaboration, or are they just merely looking for, study abroad students? And so that's something that, we've learned with a couple of conversations that we've had with universities that, maybe this isn't really going to go somewhere. And then the last thing is funding. I think, where does the money come from for this kind of stuff? Because a lot of these things, start getting pretty involved pretty quickly. And although there's grants out there, we've not really been very successful in getting grants for international projects. And so we're able to generally fund faculty involvement through things like Perkins, which is obviously nationwide funding for career technical education. The students don't get any kind of financial benefit. They cannot get a stipend or pay or anything like that. So they're doing it generally either for the academic credit or for obviously like the portfolio content or just for the skills development. They realized, that that's important for them as well. But for the faculty, usually there's a small stipend involved to kind of to help them, participate with their time that's involved. So with that, I'm happy to entertain some questions. If you leave with nothing today, you know how to say thank you in English. Many of you may know how to say it in Spanish, but you're also going to know how to say it in Romanian, which is mulțumesc. And so that's one of the things that I learned in engaging with our Romanian partners.
That's great, Jason. Thank you so much for the presentation. I'll just remind people that you can enter your questions in the chat box if you wish. You can either send those to everybody, or if you prefer, you can just direct message to me. I think Gabrielle is going to open up the microphone, so if people would like to ask questions in person, you're welcome to do so. I'll maybe kick us off. I've got a couple of them here, Jason, regarding some details from your proposals. One person was asking if you could say a little bit more about the green batten roof. That's not something that we see very often in North America, and I don't know how common those types of things are. Maybe you could just comment on that. Yeah, so the climate of El Salvador is predominantly, it's hot and humid year-round pretty much. Their seasons are the rainy season, where it's hot and humid, and the non-rainy season where it's hot and humid. So they're again always in a cooling mode for structures. And so one of the greatest passive ways to cool a structure is to simply shade it in some way from excess solar radiation. So we can obviously do that a lot of different ways. We can plant trees that have large canopies that protect our buildings from the shade or from the sun, but also we can do in this case, which was kind of like a trellis or a lattice structure that vegetation could grow on to create that shading capability, but not be necessarily a green roof that's physically attached to the house. So by being decoupled or being separated away, there's less
heat conducted physically into the house, but it still provides that shading capability. And somewhat similar, we can do that also with photovoltaic solar panels, which I think are a great way to both actively generate electricity and also passively cool a house, because they create an additional sort of shade structure for the primary roof of a building.
Yeah, it didn't occur to me in that presentation that it's kind of the tropical analog of a green roof, right?
Yep. Yeah.
That's a good way to think about it. I got another comment from a participant about the design that the students did for the facility that was in the neighborhood that had the highway constructed through it. And the comment, I'm paraphrasing a little bit here, was that it seemed like an opportunity for sort of a commingling of architecture with urban planning and transportation, and kind of a nice interdisciplinary interface there. And I'm just curious if that was an aspect of that part of the project, or if your students were able to kind of make those connections at all.
Absolutely, yeah. And I don't have time to obviously go into their full design. I just showed a picture of the model, but their presentation was much richer, and it did weave together a lot of the cultural aspects. They actually did a sort of historical survey of the area. They started learning about some of the residents that had been affected by the freeway that went through there in the 1960s. And so they wove in some of those personal histories in their design solution, as well as some of the cultural aspects of Nashville. Obviously, music is a big sort of source of pride for Nashville. And it goes beyond just sort of country music. There's also a lot of different forms of music from Nashville, blues and jazz and whatnot. And so that also became a sort of audible feature of their design solution, as well as some of the other project teams. So yeah, it's more than just creating a park or creating a community center. It's how can we also sort of tell a story or build up a community identity with the design solution.
Yeah, and I know that was in that time of history in the 1960s, there was an effort to get every freeway connected to the very center of downtowns, and it bisected a lot of neighborhoods. And to the extent that architecture and urban planning can address those past poor choices and sort of stitch communities back together is kind of nice. I had a couple people comment on the use of the metric and English measuring systems, and it was kind of interesting watching your students' video that even they were switching back and forth between square feet and square meters at times,
Yeah.
and Celsius and Fahrenheit. How big? I'm just curious, because I'm in engineering, and we sometimes say 30% of an engineer's job is unit conversions. How big of a challenge was that for from an instructional standpoint?
Well, obviously we have the benefit now of Google, and you can just go on real quick and convert something on the fly. But we found even during their presentations, certain terminologies, and that's one of the things that the students left with is learning terms, technical terms in both languages that none of them had ever been exposed to before. But sometimes during the presentations, they would flip languages depending on which way they felt comfortable speaking. So, it wasn't perfect, but it was enlightening for everybody involved, realizing like, oh, maybe I need to spend a little more time on that aspect of this other language so that I can be more fluent, if I'm going to work on a project in that mode.
Yeah, I can appreciate that, having taught some bilingual solar classes in Central America. I will tell you, those technical terms, they don't show up in the standard phrase books, right? And they don't always translate quite as easily as you think they might. So this might be a question that relates to a number of our schools in the CREATE network. We've got quite a few schools that either are involved in international collaborations, doing study abroad, or are thinking about it. I'm curious if there's, one or two key pieces of advice or any potential pitfalls that you might share with folks so that they can, be proactive in thinking about those kinds of things.
Well, I think that, again, obviously trying to be sober about what goals you establish for a project. And I think that goes back to my original suggestion of starting local, starting modest, and kind of building from there, and try not to take on more than because we obviously don't know what we don't know, and so it seems like, oh, I can do all this and I can do all that, and we can lead a team of students, and then when you really start getting into the implementation of something, you realize, oh my gosh, there's all these logistics, and there's all the just for instance, for us to send a team of students to compete in Nashville was a huge undertaking. Months of planning, of coordinating travel, and getting the funding and all the board of trustees approval, and the logistics involved is shipping a model to from California to Nashville, and that was pretty modest, and so you can imagine if you're trying to do something internationally, it's only going to be that much more complicated, if you're dealing with different languages and passports and whatnot. So I think keeping it simple and building capacity. I know it's obviously people get excited, I want to do all these things, but you really need to kind of take it one step at a time. And also I think that starting locally helps you build more local relationships. A lot of us educators already have local relationships, and so that's a good springboard to okay, what about thinking statewide? How can I start doing collaborations statewide? And then sort of like in my part of the United States, we're in the Western region, so we often do stuff with Arizona and Nevada and whatnot. But if you're in the East Coast or the North or whatever, how can you do stuff in your region, and then kind of go from there. But a lot of the relationships or how we've met some of these partners in the first place is through our college's international studies program, and they're just constantly probing, trying to meet international partners willing to do either to have students come study at our school or vice versa. And so we kind of piggyback onto those relationships, and hey, do they have an architecture program, and can we meet them? Can we just sit down and have a chat? And sometimes something comes from it, and sometimes something doesn't. And I think the beauty of the pandemic is it's given all of us a comfort level with Zoom, so we can start building a relationship virtually before we actually start doing any physical travel. Now, Orlando Flores, actually one of our professors, did fly down to El Salvador as part of the project, and got to meet with their faculty, which was kind of good. But that was because he had a familiarity with the area and spoke the language fluently and stuff. So at some point, whether we go to Romania or not, I'm not sure, but that would be kind of like the next step for our program.
All right, last question for you is an easy one. We'll have you put on your futurist cap. Where do you think the prices of batteries are headed, and what would a design for a sustainable home look like 5 or 10 years from now?
Okay, well, there's obviously a lot of possibilities, and I'm not one of the things they say about architects, or what differentiates architects from engineers, is that engineers know everything about nothing, and architects know nothing about everything. We're generalists. We don't know a lot of the nuts and bolts stuff very well, but it's hard to say. I think obviously batteries right now, one of the limiting factors is the source of materials, and so if you think geopolitically, there's a scramble for accessing a lot of the raw materials that make batteries, and unless or until there's some sort of huge shift in how batteries are made or the materials are made from, I think the prices are going to continue to go up. Now, as far as the sort of the buildings of the future relative to batteries, we're sort of right now, unfortunately, tethered to the bureaucracy of the utility lobbyists in some ways. This is something we actually found out in our project with El Salvador, that they too are limited by the size of the solar array that they can put on a project. It's capped by the utility company so that they don't overproduce, which is one of the limiting factors that we have in the United States. We can't generally, let's say in a residential project in California, if you want to put a big solar array and then have batteries to store that power in case of an earthquake or whatever, a fire or something like that, you really can't do it. You have to be tied to the utility grid and are sort of capped at whatever your energy profile is for your house.
Yeah, and that's where the batteries might allow us to be a little more flexible, for sure. Well, thank you, Jason. I want to just share my screen briefly so that we can let folks know about a few upcoming events for the Create Center. We do have some virtual workshops coming up sponsored by KidWind in the month of December. And we also have our monthly Create coffee hours coming up in December and January, where we'll be talking about renewable and alternative energy and advisory boards for clean energy programs. Coming up in the spring, we'll have additional website events with the winners of our teaching tricks, tips, and ideas presenters coming up later this spring. And you can find more information on all of those activities on our website, which the address is easy to remember. It's just createenergy.org. So with that, I will thank everybody for joining us today. And thank you once again, Jason, for presenting and sharing with us the work that you've been involved with at College of the Canyons.
My pleasure. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Jason.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Jason.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you.